Hey everybody, it's GobletX, and welcome back to some more Magic Arena. Today we're going to be playing my very first Brothers War Premier draft on the channel, outside of the early access drafts, of course. Very cool format, and I'm super excited to hop in. So without further ado, let's see where the cards take us today. We've got a pretty excellent rare, Harbin Vanguard Aviator, blue and a white for a 3/2 flyer, already a ridiculously good deal in limited. And if we somehow manage to draft a very dedicated soldier deck, we can get this additional trigger when we attack with 5 or more soldiers, giving them all +1/+1 in flying till end of turn. So the best way to trigger that in limited is to draft a bunch of cards that produce 1/1 soldier tokens. There are cards like that in the format. So I'm going to go with Harbin here. Pretty cool card. We do get to show off some of the cool mechanics in the set in this pack. There's a retro-framed artifact in every pack, a very powerful reprint, or a very classic reprint from a bunch of different sets. It's the Mystical Archives for artifacts, and Unearth is another mechanic, and the Frontliner would be a great card in the same deck as Harbin, as it is an Unearthing Soldier. So the Unearth mechanic is you spend the Unearth cost to bring the creature back for 1 turn, and then it'll get exiled if it dies during that turn, or if it's or in the end step of the turn, it'll just be permanently exiled. So 1 final swing with anything that you unearth. So pick 2 now, we have a Prison Sentence, which is a pretty great removal spell in white. 3 mana to enchant a creature, make it so it can't attack, block, or use its activated abilities. And you get to scry 2 when you play this, so it's a very good removal spell. I'm quite a big fan of it. The biggest flaw in this card is that there's a little bit more main deckable artifact and enchantment removal than usual. And then other than that, if your opponent can return the creature to their hand, they can recast it, obviously. Or if they can sacrifice the creature for value, then it works pretty well. But this card really makes up for that, giving you scry when this enters the battlefield as well. So probably going to roll with the Prison Sentence here. Very nice card. Iron Claw Crusher, huge big prototype card. This does show off that mechanic, which is a cool one. You can cast it for the full mana cost as the power and toughness you see at the bottom, or the reduced mana cost for the smaller version of the card. So that's a pretty cool one. Hero of the Dunes is an absurdly good card. This is 3, a white and a black for a 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, return an artifact or creature with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, and creatures you control with mana value 3 or less get +1/+0. This card is just super good. Not once have I played against this card and thought, oh, that doesn't do much. It always does some ridiculous things, and I'd be more than happy to even potentially splash it in. I'm probably just going to take this card here. Very reminiscent of like a Bortuck Bone Rattle, something like that, just a more aggressive version. So super good card. I'm going to take that here. There's also a Perilous Vault, which is probably pretty good. A little bit slow, but I mean, exile everything on the board. Your opponent can see it coming unless you just spend 9 mana in 1 turn to do it. But it is still a board wipe, and board wipes are always great, so that's an option too from the retro-framed artifacts. But I'm going to go Hero of the Dunes. Been a massive fan of this card, even just watching it from the other side of the table. So here we are, pack 1, pick 4. Airlift Chaplain is a very nice card for the black-white decks. In this format, black-white has a theme of creatures with mana value 3 or less, as you can see on Hero of the Dunes, and a theme of recursion, reanimation, that you can see from the Hero of the Dunes as well. Airlift Chaplain also fits into those archetypes well, because it mills you a few cards to fill your graveyard with things to reanimate, and it cares about creatures with mana value 3 or less, so I like Airlift Chaplain a lot. Kayla's Reconstruction is a card I'm really not too sure on. You're looking 7 cards deep for artifacts and creatures with mana value 3 or less. 7 cards deep, even if half of your deck is that card type, you maybe get 2 or 3 of them. I mean, getting 2 or 3 of them is really strong, right? Spend 5 mana to get 2 3-drops maybe at the best. I don't know, it seems like a really expensive version of like a, I forget what the card is called. It's 3 and a green. You look 6 cards deep into your library and put 2 cards with mana value 3 or less onto the battlefield. But that's a classic, super powerful card, so obviously it's going to be worse than that one. So pack 1, pick 5 now. Not a lot going on in white or black. Ambush Paratrooper is very filler. Trench Stalker is good if you can consistently draw an additional card each turn, because then you're getting a 5 mana 4/5 Death Touch Lifelinker, which is a really good deal. Just got to make sure you have the card draw to go with it. Nothing great in blue either for Harbin. I guess Koilos Rock is the best. Defabricate doesn't look incredible. Thanos is probably the strongest card, but it's very narrow and completely off color from what we're doing right now, so I'll just take Ambush Paratrooper. Not super happy with that pack. This pack I'm a little more okay with. There's some very cool stuff going on here. We have Urza Powerstone Prodigy for the blue-white deck. 3 mana for 1/3 Vigilance. We can use it to loot, to draw a card and discard a card, and anytime we discard an artifact, we get a Powerstone onto the board tapped. Pretty powerful mechanic there. We alternatively could just go with the Phalanx Vanguard, which is a nice aggressive card in our white deck. It's going to fit really well into the black-white deck or the blue-white deck. And we're kind of stuck between either. I don't love splashing too much in this format. And the one thing we know for sure is that we're a white deck. So Phalanx Vanguard versus Urza, here's the big question. I'm actually going to get aggressive and just take Phalanx Vanguard. Just a bunch of aggressive white cards. Decide our secondary color later. I think either our blue-white deck or our black-white deck is going to be really aggressive, which is not really where Urza shines a lot, because you don't really need Power Stone tokens if you are a dedicated aggro deck. So Warlord's Elite looks pretty good. 3 mana for a 4/4, but you have to tap 2 artifacts, creatures, or lands you control to play it. So 5 mana for a 4/4 at worst, at best. Maybe you have some random dorks on board to play this early. Looks solid. Traxodemon also looks solid. Evolving Wilds is obviously always good. I'll go with the Warlord's Elite. I haven't played with it yet, but it looks like it should be a decent card. But it might be harder to trigger than I'm giving it credit for. Gixian Skullflare I think is going to be a pretty nice role filler for the black-white aggro deck, because again, you definitely care about milling yourself in that archetype for all of your graveyard recursion cards like Hero of the Dunes, and if you're milling yourself a lot, you can fill that graveyard pretty quickly for the Gixian Skullflare to start getting extra +1/+1 counters on it. So I'll go with that. Not a fan of Thran Vigil. The idea behind this card is as you are reanimating creatures or unearthing them, you're getting a +1/+1 counter every time you do it. But doesn't really make it worth its mana cost till you've done it 3 or 4 times, which is kind of a lot. Big fan of Yoshin Frontliner here. Nice aggressive card for our aggressive white deck here, and it's going to fit really well into either archetype, because if we mill this in our black-white self-mill strategy, we can unearth it for value, and if we're in the blue-white deck where we want a bunch of soldiers with Harbin, this is a soldier, so I'll take a Yoshin Frontliner here. Nice aggressive card. Pretty happy with it. Pack 1, pick 10, we have a Dredging Claw, which I guess theoretically works with a bunch of unearth cards. It can snap attached to things as you reanimate them, so good value with the unearth. There's also Retrieval Agent here. If we go for the blue-white soldiers deck, that's okay. These are both okay. They're like filler level. They'll fit into whichever archetype that we put them in, but not be super impressive. I'll just take the soldier. Oh, unfortunate we get another one here. Sardian Cliffstomper is really good if you can manage to go mono red, and if somebody pivots into that, it looks like red's pretty open here. That being said, these red cards aren't great, but yeah, if you're mono red, this is 2 mana for what eventually turns into a 4/4 on turn 4, and even bigger as you're attacking. I'm just going to rare draft though, take some nonsense for Historic Brawl, I guess. Scatter Ray is not unplayable. Counter an artifact or creature unless its controller pays 4. That will counter things for the majority of the game. Eventually your opponent can pay for it, but it'll take quite some time for that to happen. Veteran's Power Blade, even if you're a dedicated soldiers deck, is still a little bit slow for an equipment. Defabricate might be main deckable. Counters artifact or enchantment spell, but you need it at the right time. This is a pretty bad top deck late game. Yeah, I think Trench Stalker's a fine auto pick. Thank you, Arena. Check my collection here. We've got like nothing of this set. I don't know what I was expecting there. All right, pack 2, pick 1. We open up an incredible rare, this Steel Seraph. So for double white and 1, we get a 3/3 flyer. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gains flying, vigilance, or lifelink until end of turn. And it just, yeah, it has flying straight up. This is a ridiculous card. By itself, a 3 mana 3/3 flying vigilance or a 6 mana 5/4 flying vigilance. And it's even got the flexibility to put those abilities wherever you need them. Ridiculous bomb. Steel Seraph is definitely the pick, and it's probably going to end up being the strongest card in our whole deck. Pack 2, pick 2. Another prison sentence is pretty nice. Big fan of that, might just scoop it up. This Fateful Handoff is a pretty funny rare. You donate one of your cards to your opponent and draw cards equal to the mana value of whatever you gave them. It's very funny, but that doesn't seem playable for limited. Repair and Recharge is actually a little better than I thought it was. So for 5 mana, you return an artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker from your grave to the battlefield and create a Powerstone token. The big flaw in this card obviously being that it doesn't return creatures, but when you think about it, it actually does. It returns artifact creatures, so if you mill a really big prototype card, you can bring that back with this card, so it's actually not as bad as I thought it was, but Prison Sentence is probably still a little bit better. Just great unconditional removal, always good. Pack 2, pick 3 now. We've got a recommission for the black-white deck. It's about reanimating something that costs 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield and putting a +1/+1 counter on it, which is pretty huge. For the blue-white soldiers deck, we have a Zephyr Sentinel, 2 mana for a 2/1 flash flying soldier. Return something to your hand, puts a +1/+1 counter on it. Hard choices. Harbin is the big reason to be in blue-white, and that's about it. Hero of the Dunes, the big reason to be black-white, that's about it. Really not committed to either still. Individually, Disfigure's pretty good, and Zephyr Sentinel's pretty good. I think I'm going to just go Zephyr Sentinel here and maybe push towards blue-white. Because if I'm splashing anything, it's going to be a lot easier to splash Hero of the Dunes than it is to splash Harbin. Because Harbin's a 2-drop. We want to play this turn 2 consistently, but we can wait to hit a black source till turn 5, so maybe we get to be blue-white and just splash in a tiny bit of black here. That might be reasonable. Again, splashing is quite a bit harder in this format than usual. They put in very, very few ways to get whatever land type you need. I guess Journeyer's Kite does that, but it does it really, really slow. Really cool card for Commander, though. Cool reprint. But yeah, they put in very little mana fixing, because the idea in this set is that if you want to be playing 3 colors, you get a lot of help in doing that just by having a lot of colorless cards in your deck, so you know you can cast some stuff even if you're stuck off of one of your colors. Alright, pretty happy to be in blue-white now. Wing Commando, I think, is one of blue's best commons. 3 mana for a 2/2 flyer with prowess. Just a very good deal. Efficient, evasive threat. Gets in for a lot of damage pretty quickly. Emergency Weld's a pretty good black common, but more committed to blue-white here. And I think we're shaping up to be a pretty reasonable blue-white, like flying soldiers strategy. A lot of Meticulous Excavations here. This is a good card, but it is really slow. You return permanents that you control to your owner's hand so that you can recast them, get their enter the battlefield effects. But yeah, feels too slow. The really good synergy is you can do it with an Unearth card so that it doesn't get exiled. Right? It gets around Unearth's ability by exiling the Unearth card, then returning it from exile to our hand. So let's go for a Yoshin frontliner here. Just another soldier, another very aggressive card, good on Earth if we have some self-mill. Another Airlift Chaplain seems pretty beautiful. Lauren's Escape is actually pretty solid as well. If you think of this like the Tamio's Safekeeping from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, that was a pretty great green common. That was 1 green, give any permanent hexproof indestructible and gain 2. Scry 1 is a pretty nice trade-off for gain 2 life, so it's a pretty good little protection spell here you can also use to win combat. I don't think that card is bad at all, but I'm going to take Airlift Chaplain over it. We've got a couple pretty good Unearth cards now to mill into. Energy Refractor is a pretty safe way to get that Hero of the Dunes mana. And there's not much else going on in this pack, so we'll scoop it up. Yoshin Medic is technically a soldier, but I can also take another Energy Refractor for that Hero of the Dunes mana. Machine Over Matter is also fine. Machine Over Matter and Yoshin Medic, both fine cards, but I'll get another Refractor. Try to be pretty heavy into blue for a Flow of Knowledge to be pretty impactful. You're not going to be really happy with this card unless you have 4 islands on board, which is a bit rough here because we're definitely heavier into white than blue right now, but it is the closest to getting played in our deck out of everything in this pack. Okay, Harbin really likes going as wide as possible with soldiers, and for that, a Scrapwork Cohort is a great card. It's a 3-1 soldier, and it comes with a 1-1 soldier. Then if it honors it later, it gets another 1-1 soldier. So I'll scoop that up. Stern Lesson's also a pretty solid card, an instant to draw 2 cards, then discard a card and get a Powerstone. But I think the Cohort is just really nice for the potential soldier tribal synergies. Take a look at our curve here to decide between the 3 and the 4 drop. Okay, I've got a lot of 3s. We'll take the 4 drop Retrieval Agent. I guess I already had one of those. Oops. Yeah, I'm not going to be playing green. We'll take a Springleaf Drum that I doubt I will play. And let's see what we open up in the final pack. Difficult choice here. I think we have a powerful but slow rare versus a very solid and quick uncommon. I think I'd rather get aggressive here and take a Thopter Mechanic. 2 mana for a 2-1 that gives us a 1-1 flyer when it dies is already a good card for any relatively aggressive deck. And if we're drawing any extra cards during our turn, we're getting a +1/+1 counter on this thing to make it even more aggro, which is super sweet. It's between this card and Drafna, which is potentially more impactful. It's just a lot slower. The idea behind this is as we're casting our artifact spells, we can spend an additional 3 mana to get a copy of that artifact spell. So the copy hits the board as a token, so we double up any artifacts we cast if we have the mana for it, but it's going to require a lot of mana to do that, so it is a pretty expensive, pretty slow card. So I'm just going to take the more aggressive 2 mana 2-1 there with some really good abilities. We have an Aeronaut Cavalry here, which fits with both the soldier theme and the flyers theme pretty well. Might take that, see if we can wheel another Scrapwork Cohort. We wheeled one last pack. I don't see a huge reason we wouldn't wheel this one. Yep, I'll try out an Aeronaut Cavalry here. And oh my god, we get rewarded with the literal best rare for this archetype in my opinion. Skystrike Officer, 3 mana for a 2/3 flyer, so it's evasive, which means it's easy to get in multiple attacks with it, and when it does declare those attacks, it's spitting out 1/1 soldiers, and not only that, if we get 3 or more soldiers on board, we can tap 3 untapped soldiers to draw a card. This card takes over games quickly. This is a very snowbally threat where if your opponent doesn't have the removal for it, the turn you play it or the turn after, it's going to completely demolish your opponent. So pack 3, pick 4. I am pushing a little heavier into blue if I want to take a second Flow of Knowledge. That could be interesting. There's also a Thopter Architect, which has a very good ability. If you're getting artifacts to enter the battlefield, you're giving creatures flying till end of turn. It is unfortunately not a soldier, though. It's also a Disenchant. We've already got some prison sentences for removal. And the blue counterspell, the Scatter Ray, that we can play. Flow of Knowledge, Thopter Architect, both seem fine. They're probably the best, probably above Disenchant. I'm going to go for a second Flow of Knowledge. See if I can push heavy into blue this pack. We don't have any assembly workers, so Self-Assembler is not where it's at. Forging the Anchor is definitely not where it's at unless you have like 15 artifacts. Doubt we do. We have 8. Desynchronize is fine. It's 1-for-1 removal because your opponent has to skip their next draw step if they put the card on top. So even if they get it right back, they still skip the draw step, which costs them a card, sorta. I think I'd rather just have another Aeronaut Cavalry. Another Scatter Ray seems fine. And Scatter Ray gets a lot better when you have like a Zephyr Sentinel for a flash creature that you can cast if you don't need to counter something. Seems kind of cool here. Lauren's Escape's also cool here though, but go for the Scatter Ray. I'm trying to push heavier into blue for some big Flow of Knowledge stuff. Ooh, Elsewhere Flask is perfect. With Elsewhere Flask, we get to cycle this, just spend 2 mana, draw a card the majority of the time. But if we ever have this on board and draw a Flow of Knowledge, we can sacrifice this before we cast the Flow of Knowledge to make all of our lands islands and get the full draw 5, draw 6, however many lands we control out of it. Got an air marshal, fine little soldier. Do we need more 2-drops? 3, 4, 5. Got 5 of them. I mean, having one more 2-drop wouldn't be terrible, and our other options aren't great. Unit of the Third Path or Deadly Riposte. I guess Unit of the Third Path helps trigger the Zephyr Sentinel, but let's just get another soldier in here at 2 mana. Probably not playing this nonsense. Combat Courier actually might be the best one here, because this can trigger a Zephyr Sentinel or a Thopter mechanic twice. Because we can sacrifice it to draw a card during our turn, that will be our second card drawn that turn. The turn after that, we can unearth it, sacrifice it, draw another card on that turn as well. So Combat Courier actually a pretty nice addition if we have a Thopter mechanic on board. Chromatic Star is okay mana fixing, and it also triggers Thopter mechanic if we sack it during our turn, cycles itself easily. I like the synergies it has to splash in the Hero of the Dunes or trigger the Thopter mechanic, so I'll take it over Lauren's Escape. Just going to keep mentioning Lauren's Escape but never taking it. Soul Guide Lantern, another card that triggers our Thopter mechanic. Keeper of the Cadence seems way too slow. Mass Production, I guess theoretically with Harbin, this could be the one deck that actually wants this card. Guess I'll take a Mass Production and maybe we do some funny things with it. Get 4 1/1s off that one card. Could be funny. We might actually play Desynchronize. Probably not, but maybe. Pretty good with Flow of Knowledge, actually. Then if we need to use Interaction, we cast Desynchronize, and if we don't need to use Interaction, we cast Flow of Ideas. And just draw a boatload of cards. That's pretty cool. A lot of cool stuff going for this deck. I think with double Energy Refractor and Chromatic Star, I'm probably going to go for the Hero of the Dunes in here. I was thinking about maybe just not running it, but double Refractor, Chromatic Star, even Elsewhere Flask technically works. So the way that this card works is when you sacrifice it, all of your lands become just the land type that you chose, not in addition to their other types. So you do need to play this correctly. If you're trying to cast a Hero of the Dunes with it, what you need to do is you need to tap 4 mana. So tap your white source for sure, and then tap, 3 plains or islands or whatever, then sacrifice the flask so that all of your lands are then swamps, and then tap the swamp and cast the hero. So you need to float your mana before you sacrifice this, but other than that, this is also a mana fixing card, so that's pretty nice. So Springleaf Drum, I just don't think that I'm going to be wanting to tap my creatures to cast other stuff, really, in the early game. Supply Drop is instant speed, but it's a pretty mediocre little combat trick. Makes up for that by letting you draw a card later, but just doesn't seem like really where it's at here. So I'm going to cut those two right away. Mass Production just feels so glacially slow that it doesn't feel worth it. But it does give you enough soldiers to single-handedly trigger Harbin, which is really funny. If you have a Harbin on board and then you cast Mass Production, you then have exactly 5 soldiers for the trigger. It's really cute, but I just don't think it's going to be really worth it. Kind of want to just lower the amount of cards that I have that cost more than 3, so Hero of the Dunes can reanimate pretty much anything. Airlift Chaplain can return pretty much anything. So cut these 2 retrieval agents. But Scrapwork Cohort, 2 Aeronaut Cavalries, and Hero of the Dunes are all still pretty powerful, so we might just roll with those. Our 2 Scatter Rays and 2 Prison Sentences, is that enough interaction? Is that what we want to roll with here? Still not super certain about the Scatter Rays. We have some cards that help us hold them up at instant speed. Like I hold up Scatter Ray, and if I don't cast it, I cast a Zephyr Sentinel. But that's just one flash creature. I guess I have an Ambush Paratrooper as well. But this really does seem like a very aggressive deck where I'm not holding up extra mana until I've already dumped out my 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, and potentially even 4-drop. Just don't think I'm holding up mana that often. I'd probably rather just run double Prison Sentence and Desynchronize. How many creatures are we at right now? We're at 19. That is overkill. Definitely want to cut a few of these. Keep the super aggro frontliner in. Love the combat courier with the Thopter. Yeah, we might actually cut this air marshal that I put in. You just have to dump a bunch of mana into it for it to do some stuff, and we already have plenty of flyers without its ability. So this actually might be a lot weaker than I expected. Warlord's Elite can actually get played turn 3 relatively consistently in this deck because we have 3 1-drops and 5 2-drops. So there will be some games where we just go 1-drop, 2-drop, and then 3 mana 4/4 turn 3. That being said, it's still inconsistent. That's not going to happen every game, and every other 3 mana card in this deck is just exceptional at almost any time. Like, all of our other 3 mana creatures are Steel Seraph, Wing Commando, Sky Strike Officer, and Airlift Chaplain. Our 3-drops are just so good. Warlord's Elite becomes a harder sell than it usually would be. Do we have any non-soldiers in here? Oh, we have an Artificer. Aw, these Chaplains are Clerics. That's unfortunate. Really weird this one is just a human Cleric, but the 1/4 lifelink is a human Cleric Soldier. The card with less power is more of a soldier than this one. I guess fair enough. There are some high toughness soldiers in here. Yeah, we've got a good soldier count. 14, we'll have 12 even if I cut these 2. Feels pretty good. I think I am going to cut those 2 and the Scatter Raise the mass production. Still have to cut 4 more cards. Not a lot of stuff we can throw Mightstone's animation onto, to be fair. I can put it on an energy refractor, that would be a lot of fun, but feels a little inconsistent for the deck. Desynchronize is a bit slow, but just don't have all that much removal. Maybe I just want to lower the curve a lot. I could drop Desynchronize in some Cavalries and keep the curve really low and really aggressive. If I'm going to go that far, then I would maybe even just want to cut Flow of Knowledges to put the Scatter Raise in and just play a really low to the ground tempo game. But then I'm losing the Elsewhere Flask combo, which is the funnest thing that the deck has. I really want to keep the Elsewhere Flask combo in here. It's probably dumb, probably not a great idea, but I really can't resist. We're at 17 creatures here. Drop down to 15 if I cut double cavalry. Having to have room for these mana rocks is pretty rough at cutting down to 40. Cut a land. Down to 16 lands here. Keep that curve low. 5 is the top of the curve. We only have 3 of those if I cut the cavalries. Might go 1 desynchronize, 1 cavalry, call it there. Again, I could put the Scatter Rays back in. They do seem like they'd be reasonable in here. Yeah, I think I'd actually like to try them out and treat those as what we do when we're done playing creatures. We just hold up Scatter Rays, counter whatever our opponent does. Problem is they're so much better the earlier you cast them, because the later you hold on to them, the more likely your opponent can just pay for it. It's 4 mana though, that's a huge tax. I'm going to try out at least one of these. We'll keep 1 of that in here. I guess I'll keep 1 Flow of Knowledge in here, so I still have the Flask combo, maybe. But now I can try Scatter Ray out. And this is a 16 land deck. Make sure the mana's all good here. 9 white cards, 7 blue, 1 black. 1 black card with 4 ways to get black mana. I'm going to cut this swamp out of here to put in another Plains, I think. Do I have any double white cards? I do. Steel Seraph is double white. I don't have any double blue cards, but I have Flow of Knowledge. Once that island count high. This could be wrong, but hopefully with all this mana fixing, I can hit double white consistently off these. Just play 1 more island, so we're more likely to have a high island count for Flow of Knowledge without needing the Flask as often. So we can actually Flow of Knowledge for draw 4, discard 2 sometimes. Probably going to want to edit this deck I mean, looking at a 3-color mana base with only 16 lands, Flow of Knowledge is generally going to be pretty bad without Elsewhere Flask. So the deck is probably supposed to be like minus Flow of Knowledge plus the second Scatter Ray or something like that. But I can't resist, want to play the Elsewhere Flask Flow of Knowledge combo, so we're going to do that, at least for game 1. So this is going to be the deck. Alright, here we have a look at the final list that we'll be playing with today. It's going to be an aggressive blue-white soldiers deck splashing in one Hero of the Dunes. So a really, really aggressive curve here. We have a couple 1-drops even, like Yoshin Frontliner, getting in for some extra damage while having that very nice soldier card type for our 1 soldier synergy card. But yeah, just an aggro 1-drop with Unearth. Combat Courier, another 1-drop with Unearth. This one helps draw some extra cards, which is nice. Looking at the 2-drops, a bunch of pretty aggressive creatures on curve, which is great. The Thopter mechanic is going to be really nice if we get it with the Combat Courier or the Elsewhere Flask, Double Energy Refractor, or Chromatic Star. Those are all different ways to draw 1 additional card during our turn, triggering the draw your second card ability on the Thopter mechanic, making it a 2-mana 3/2 that gives us a 1/1 flyer when it dies, so really good card there. Zephyr Sentinel is incredible, 2 mana for a 2/1 flyer that you can cast at instant speed, and you can bounce one of your soldiers in response to a removal spell to save it in your hand and make the Zephyr Sentinel larger. The majority of our creatures in this deck are soldiers, so the Zephyr Sentinel is going to be really, really good in here. Harbin is a very good aggressive threat, 2 mana for a 3/2 flyer, and if we happen to have 5 soldiers on board, if we attack with all of them, every creature we control gets +1/+1 and flying till end of turn. That should be game ending anytime we get 5 soldiers on board. So Harbin's a huge one. And then a bunch of good flying threats at 3 mana as well, including the very balmy Skystrike Officer spitting out additional soldiers, letting us tap soldiers to draw cards. The next bomb that we have at 3 mana, the Steel Seraph, a 3/3 flyer giving additional abilities to one of our creatures each turn. Ridiculous curve of great flyers at 2 and 3 mana, and then some decent soldier synergy cards like Scrapwork Cohort and Aeronaut Cavalry at the top end of the curve, and Hero of the Dunes being really good in this deck because it can reanimate Harbin or Skystrike Officer, so 2 of our bombs, or just any decent creature from our graveyard, while giving the majority of creatures we control +1/+0, so a ridiculously good splash for the Hero of Dunes. We then have a little bit of interaction, 2 Prison Sentences and a Scatter Ray, but other than that, some mana fixing to fit the Hero of the Dunes in, and all of these are not only mana fixing, but they're synergy pieces to work with Thopter mechanic. And last but not least, because I'm a goofball, this should probably be a second Scatter Ray, but I've got a Flow of Knowledge in here, even though we're 3 colors and we're not going to have a million islands, just because we have an Elsewhere Flask in here, which, if we live in Magical Christmas Land and we draw both Elsewhere Flask and Flow of Knowledge, we can make all of our lands islands, then cast Flow of Knowledge, then draw a ridiculous amount of cards. So this is the one card I 100% probably shouldn't be playing. Best build of this deck is probably minus a Flow, up a Scatter Ray or something, but that's the build I'm doing, and we'll see how it does as we head into the gameplay. Alright, here we are, here we go, game 1. Not the fastest hand ever, but I don't think we can mulligan this. We've got a 3-drop and a 4-drop, and we have removal. Yeah, pretty slow for our deck. We do have 5 2-drops, 3 1-drops, so not having anything to do turn 1, turn 2 is a bit slow on average for our deck. Probably not quite slow enough to justify a mulligan, though. Playing against a black-red deck, they're going to start with a 2-mana 3/1 with Reach. So that is just going to trade off into the Airlift Chaplain, so we're hoping we can mill something here that it can pick up. Well, I guess we're picking up a Plains then. Definitely good to get 3 lands out of the way. We do not need that much mana. But a 1/1 flyer is more than big enough to trade into the 3/1 from our opponent, so we'll snap off that trade. And that's why I was so ready to pick up even just a Plains there, because making it a 2/2 flyer, it would still just trade off into their 3/1 because that card's got Reach. Alright, we'll play the island here. If we can draw another island, a turn 5 Flow of Knowledge could be pretty big. Could prison sentence the 2-1 flyer, but currently I can just outrace it with a 3-1 and a 1-1. So we'll play those. Save our prison sentence for a scarier card later, especially since we have a good amount of flyers in the deck to trade into the Locust later if we need to. Another Rock Hunter from our opponent. Definitely a big fan that, big fan of the fact that my opponent has primarily 1 toughness creatures. That means just our 1-1 soldier tokens will be pretty valuable. Oh my god. We have the Elsewhere Flask Flow of Knowledge combo. Don't mind if I do. I think I'm going to attack with the Cohort here, but not the 1-1. I don't want to get hit for 3. But I'd also be very okay with trading this for their Rock Hunter, because I can, of course, unearth it and get another soldier. Alright, so we will hit for 3. Now I will start casting some stuff. Drop an Elsewhere Flask, see what we draw into. Another Island. I'm not going to prison sentence anything, so I will drop a Chromatic Star. And while I could cycle it for a mana right now, it's probably a little better to just leave it there in case I hit my Hero of the Dunes. That will be my black source. Because I'm definitely going to crack the Elsewhere Flask. I'm not keeping this to give me a black mana when I need it. I'm just going to Flow of Knowledge next turn. I cannot resist. Alright, Telmacool Scrapsmith. Another low toughness card. And they did not hit an artifact, so unfortunately that will be 2 toughness, so it is big enough to attack through my 1-1. Still have a solid trade for our Unearth card though. Taking 2 damage in the sky. Still not under an astronomical amount of pressure. We can trade our Cohort into their Scrapsmith and our 1-1 into their 3-1. So we're just on Flow of Knowledge, draw 6, discard 2. That should be a game-ending amount of card advantage if we're not under an immense amount of pressure by whatever they cast this turn, and if we are, we can counter it with Scatter Ray. So take 2 damage in the sky, down to 13. And they're going to pass turn, so we are going to Elsewhere Flask for blue. Draw 6, discard 2. We do naturally hit the swamp here. Discard an island. I only have 2 white sources because I kept playing all plains. I think I discard a plains over the swamp. No, I'm going to have energy refractors sitting on the board. I discard the swamp for sure. But I definitely crack Chromatic Star here just to draw the card, get that out of the way. Now that I know I won't need it for the black source. Okay, so we've got 7 mana to play around with. Our blocks are lined up on the ground. We just need to put something in the sky big enough to block Locust. Wing Commando does not win that fight. And we don't have any instance to prowess with it. We've got a counterspell, but that doesn't count. I guess I have to just play an Aeronaut Cavalry. Oh, my opponent does not removal spell that, and I'd rather hold up Scatter Ray than drop an Energy Refractor now. Alright, opponent does removal spell that. Not ideal. We're going to go down to 11 now. Scrapsmith definitely resolves. I can block that on the ground. Another 3-2. And this Locust just keeps doing its thing. Still really don't want to drop a prison sentence on it, because I don't have all that much when it comes to straight removal in this deck. Ambush Paratrooper blocks as a 2/3 flyer. That's perfect. I have to discard a card in the end step though, because I need to play it and hold up 5 mana. So I can't. Well, opponent knows I've got something here, but maybe they won't play around it perfectly. I'll discard the Combat Courier since it's got an Unearth. But discarding one of the Energy Refractors would have been just as valuable, because I'm just losing out on 1 card draw. Steel Exemplar off of Mono Black. A 6/6 trample. If I Scatter Ray that, I don't get to kill the flyer this turn. How badly do I not want to prison sentence that? I'll let it happen. I will prison sentence that card. The Scatter Ray is going to get stuck in my hand because I refused to counter the one spell I definitely could here. But like in this exchange, I get to kill one of their creatures without even losing a card. Which is like an even better deal than the Scatter Ray would be. Steel Seraph's ridiculous. That is a beautifully good card. So I prison sentence and scry for sure. Frontliner's fine. Maybe not good enough to draw right now. I can Energy Refractor and hold up the counterspell still. Should probably just play the Steel Seraph to be fair, but I'm getting so greedy with the Scatter Ray, I just really want to counter something with it. Alright, well I guess we're countering a second copy of Steel Exemplar. There you go. See, I countered the first one, it's all good. And our opponent's going to scoop them up. They are annoyed by the blue-white control nonsense going on. I did go up 4 cards by drawing 6 and discarding 2, so opponent knows everything in our hand is just more gas and they're down to 1 card in hand, so they would rather not play out that game that was likely not to go in their favor, but was likely to take quite a few more turns to end. So it will be 1-0 to start it off. The Elsewhere Flask Flow of Ideas combo gets there. Alright, here we are on the play for round 2. And here we have a turn 3 Steel Seraph, which could be really good if my opponent doesn't have removal for it, but they are so far playing a red deck, so I'm going to assume that they're going to have removal for it. This Thopter mechanic off the top just made our draw significantly better, because now we get a ridiculously good turn 2, where I use the Chromatic Star to get my white source for the Steel Seraph, and draw a card off of it, making the Thopter mechanic bigger, then play the Steel Seraph, then give the mechanic flying and hit my opponent for... oh wait, no, that's already got reach. I guess I give it Vigilance then. Trade with Rock Hunter at worst, and if I do trade with Rock Hunter, then Steel Seraph is safe to get in. Alright, and I don't trade with Rock Hunter, which means I have the Thopter mechanic as a blocker, which is beautiful. How bad am I trying to outrace here? I mean, with a Hero of the Dunes in hand, I actually probably am okay with trading. Especially because I get a Thopter out of this exchange. Definitely not walking with Steel Seraph, though. Oh, I guess I'm kind of dumb. I had an Energy Refractor, so I could have just played Energy Refractor next turn instead of Wing Commando to make that thing a 4-power creature, which would be pretty nasty. But, I mean, this plays pretty fine as well. I can just play another Flyer, keep curving out. Now they don't have a reach creature at all. They do have a 3-1. I'm tempted to hold the Thopter back. I probably will. Just give Steel Seraph a lifelink. Should be impossible for them to erase us. I'd rather play Wing Commando than Airlift Chaplain, I think. Next turn I can play an Energy Refractor and buff that. Alright, we're back to 20. Steel Seraph doing some disgusting stuff this game. Opponent goes for the swing in. Trade the 1-1 into the 3-1 unless they throw a trick at it. They do throw a lifelinking trick at it, so opponent is also going to go back to 19. Not quite 20, but pretty close. Okay, we've got Airlift Chaplain plus Refractor this turn, then we can Hero of Dunes the turn after this, depending on what we hit. We do hit a Plains, which can guarantee that we cast the Hero of the Dunes next turn, so I will play that. Gives us another 1-1 to trade into infantry as well. Get some lifelink again, hit for 6. Steel Seraph is just a ridiculous card. What do we get off of Hero here? Thopter Mechanic? Pretty nice. Actually, we just get Airlift Chaplain after we trade it off here. Or after it trades into a combat trick, that's fine too. Blitz Automaton, fair enough. Time for a very nasty Hero of the Dunes. It's going to give both of these +1/+0 and return our best card from grave. Which honestly is actually probably Thopter Mechanic because it trades off and spits out a creature when it trades. And opponent's going to scoop them up. Hero of the Dunes being some very, very good recursion there, but primarily Steel Seraph just being an absolute bomb, winning us that game against actually a pretty scary aggressive start from our opponent if we didn't have any lifelink. Here we go, game 3 now. The mana's a bit risky, but we have a frontliner and a combat courier guaranteed early game, and we can sack the combat courier to draw more cards to try to find that plains. So I'm going to roll with it here. I don't actually know which I'm supposed to play first. Probably play the courier first. If I don't draw plains next turn, I might just immediately sack the courier rather than playing anything else. Might just hit my opponent for 1, sack the courier. Courier versus courier, combat time. Ooh, Elsewhere Flask. If we trade these, neither of us gets a card draw. Kind of a perfectly fair trade. Yeah. It is what it is. Now that I've got an Elsewhere Flask, I'm just going to use that instead. Well, we have at least one white source, because we can use Elsewhere Flask in one of our turns. And I can still reanimate Courier and draw a card off of it this turn. Opponent is going to Stern Lesson, draw 2 cards, discard a card, and get a tapped Powerstone. Very nice card. Yikes. Draw another card here. Well, things are getting worse and worse. As soon as my opponent plays a scary creature at all, we can choose to cast Prison Sentence as our first white spell. And if we do that, we get to scry 2 to try to find the plains. Our opponent is in blue-red here. They have 4 mana up if they use this Power Stone for something. It looks like just a winged commando, not an artifact spell. So no use out of the Power Stone that turn. Yee! Alright, Island is terrifying. Is it worth it to Prison Sentence a commando just to scry here, or do I just play the cohort for now? We've got a reasonable play this turn, so we probably just do that. If I hit no land whatsoever, I would absolutely just pop off the Prison Sentence there, but since we hit the 4th mana, we actually get to cast a cohort at the least. So I shall. Levitating Statue. That is a pretty nasty card if you get it out early game, which our opponent has. Now, every time they cast a non-creature spell, they put a +1/+1 counter on that. And for 2 mana, they can activate it, turn it into a creature till end of turn. Right, Obliterating Bolt on the Scrapwork cohort is obviously not ideal for us, because it is exiled. We don't get to return it. It's not horrible. And we draw into the plains. There we go, that's what it's all about. Now, while our opponent only has 1 blue mana up, let's play a flyer that's too big for them to attack into. And poke them with a 2/2. Let's go. And now I get to keep Elsewhere Flask in case I hit my black spell. If I get in a position where it's going to be pretty advantageous to just cast 2 white spells in 1 turn, I might sack the flask anyway, but for now, reasonable to just hold on to it. Also, I just realized it looks like the flask is wearing a tie, which is adorable. That's not what's actually happening there. It's some kind of braid, but I'm going to pretend that the Elsewhere Flask is like a chubby torso with a tie. Another Stern Lesson from our opponent, digging into whatever they need from their deck. They have the 2 mana required. Yes, 2 mana required to activate the statue. So 2 mana to get a 3/3 flyer till end of turn. Still not quite big enough to deal with the Aeronaut Cavalry, but it's getting very close to being the biggest threat on the board. They're bringing back the combat courier here. Yep, we'll draw a card off that, sure. No attacks this turn. And we'll see what we draw into. Airlift Chaplain. Not horrible. Prison sentence still feels pretty reasonable to me. I'll only have one left if I do that, but get to set up my draws, see what's coming up. One of these is actually not bad. But with Flask on board, maybe I just dig for more spells. I feel like I'm meant to keep one of these so I can cast 2 spells next turn guaranteed. Because every spell I have is a white spell, except for the frontliner, which I can just drop this turn, I guess. Yeah, I think I need to keep one of these. The question here is if I'm supposed to pop Flask to play a 2-drop or just play a frontliner, and I feel like I probably just play a frontliner. Latnam Adept. 3/3 that gets a +1/+1 counter every turn that they draw a second card in. So it only triggers once per turn at maximum. But if they have a bunch more combat courier style cards, that can still add up relatively quickly. Alright, they're just gonna hit my face here. Activate the levitating statue on the aggressive, not on the defensive. Fair enough. I guess it's not big enough to block the cavalry anyway, so might as well get the damage in with it. Alright, we draw that plains that we've been looking for. You can shut off the adept to just keep pressuring their life total a lot here, which seems pretty reasonable. Kind of want to airlift Chaplain and just see if we hit anything that changes my plan. Because it's possible. Land, Refractor, Chromatic Star. Okay, nothing. So it's good to get these out of the way. All 3 of these are just mana, so. Yeah. A little extra aggro here. If our opponent plays a big bomb creature, we're going to have an issue, but they're blue-red. Probably don't have the scariest creatures in the world. Ooh, speaking of big bomb creatures, Sky Strike Officer and Harbin both. But I'll take the Sky Strike Officer first because I've got enough soldiers on board to immediately draw a card with that. So I can just draw into the Harbin if I need to. I mean, honestly, I probably won't. It looks like my opponent's just dead next time I attack. Worm Coil Edge. Well, it's definitely top 3 bombs in the entire format. I did say the one issue here could be if my opponent has a big bomb coming up. Pretty big issue. If I have any way to shut off the levitating statue, I can just win on the spot. But I don't have a way to do that. So just hit for 5 in the sky and they're out of here. Sky Strike Officer. Much here. I mean, I draw cards as I'm blocking now. I can flash in a Paratrooper, but I don't have the mana to buff everything after I do that. 1 mana off. Do I play this pre-combat? I don't see a need to. We're definitely not attacking on the ground, because attacking on the ground just lets my opponent gain 6 life. So I guess I just attack with Cavalry, post-combat officer here. Force them to chump with the statue or go to 2. If I attack with both, they just go to 2 and kill Chaplain and then gain 6 next turn. So I don't think I'm attacking with both here. Might just be trying to find lethal in 2 flying attacks. So I can Sky Strike Officer here. And it would be risky, but I could tap 3 soldiers right now to get a Harbin on board so that if I get an attack off next turn, my whole board is +1/+1 flying and they're just very dead. But if I do that, I only have 1 blocker up. I guess I have that and Harbin. That's probably worth it. Paratrooper does a very similar thing. Giving my whole board +1/+1 probably also finds lethal, but... Oh, I have to... This is not a soldier. Again, Airlift Chaplain not being a soldier is actually a big deal here. Because I want to block with Frontliner next turn because I can unearth it. Maybe I am just on Paratrooper then instead of Harbin. So if I go on Harbin, I have Chaplain and Harbin as blockers up. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll have exactly 5 soldiers, so if they kill just one of them, then Harbin won't trigger anyway. Guess I'm actually just on past the turn then, so I can actually block with Frontliner, then tap it to draw the card. So I still am blocking with my Unearth creature. Okay. They're going to gain 6 here. That's obviously not great for me, but hopefully they don't have a way to like untap the Worm Coil Engine or anything. In which case, they're just at 8 life. I just need to find a way to do 8 damage to them this turn to end this game. Feels like it's pretty possible. We'll see. Are they putting any other creatures on board? If not, they have a single blocker here. They block the cavalry with that. Take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Plus Paratrooper giving everything +1/+1. They're definitely dead if they don't play another blocker. If they have a way to untap Worm Coil Engine, that will be really bad for me, but I cannot think of a trick in blue or red that untaps a creature in this set. We've had a lot of them recently, but not in this set. Oh no, that's really, really bad for me. Involuntary cooldown here to lock these 2 down. So they've got 1 really big blocker with the Levitating Statue. I can attack them with 1, 2, 3, 4 total creatures. The biggest one is going to be the Soldier, which is going to get +1/+1. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3 damage blocked. I'll do 1, 2, 3 here. 4, 5 here, 6, 7 here. I hit them to 1 now. That's pretty devastating. Do my math again, but I have exactly 6 mana, which is recur the Frontliner and give everybody +1/+1. If I do those 2 things, this is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But they block the 3, take 7. Actually, this might be exact lethal. If this isn't lethal, we don't quite die on the crackback, we take 10. And I can Flow of Knowledge. So they block one of the 2 power creatures, take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It is exact lethal. I did miscount the first time. If they have no burn spell in hand, no bounce spell in hand, we exactly kill them here. All right, block the Paratrooper. I guess I don't get to Flow of Knowledge though, because I kind of have to do this to present lethal in attempts to win the game. And it resolves the final card in their hand is not another piece of interaction. Very close game there, very scary worm coil engine. Trying to take it from us in the end, but luckily enough for us, just find the way to stack up exactsies against our opponent there, and we are 3-0 to start this draft off. Game 4, here we go. One of the biggest bombs in our deck, the Sky Strike Officer, turn 3. Keep forgetting how many bombs are in this deck. It's actually kind of nuts. Probably should have started with the Combat Courier, that was dumb. Because if I don't hit a land drop next turn, I'm more than happy to just draw a card, try to get to the Officer. I guess I can do the Chromatic Star instead. But I hit the land drop, so I don't need to do either. Don't need to sack either of these cards to get to Sky Strike Officer turn 3, and Sky Strike Officer turn 3 is, if my opponent doesn't have removal, likely a death sentence for them. They are blue-red again though, so should have a lot of cheap red burn spells to kill this Sky Strike Officer. We'll find out if they do. Ooh, we've got a Harbin to play as well. If the Officer sticks around to make a couple soldiers before it dies, that could be pretty good for me. I think I'm pretty cool attacking into the mutt. Both of these have Unearth, so we're just trading Unearth cards for Unearth cards. Alright, trade into the Courier. Perfectly fine with that. Here's our Sky Strike Officer. Fingers crossed. No removal just yet. Let me get in a couple swings with this at least to make it easier to get to 5 soldiers for Harbin's ability to pop off. Don't love that my opponent's just sitting here holding up 3 mana. Really not a fan of that. I guess I just go into combat. Okay, everything's fine for now. Do I play around the scatter? I can play around the scatter ray pretty easily by just playing a paratrooper this turn. Obviously it's a decent bit less damage to not play Harbin this turn, but it's a very low risk play, because as long as they're not killing Sky Strike Officer, we've still got a pretty commanding lead on the game. Take Flight. Give that +1/+0. Every time it attacks, they draw a card. Well, I can make sure they only draw 1 card off of it, which is pretty good. Oh, they're over it. They are so over it. They did not like that one bit. Alright. Yeah, that was not necessarily a great time for my opponent. And I suppose we are going to be 4-0 now. We are guaranteed to pretty much break even. It is 1,500 gems to play in a Premier Draft event. And we got 1,400 gems, everything that we drafted, and 3 packs out of the deal. So pretty happy with that, but no losses under our belt so far. We're going to keep playing as much as we can, maybe even head into a potential 7-win run. Game 5 now undefeated so far with our blue-white soldiers deck, and a very good hand here just got even better by drawing into a Sky Strike Officer. Opponent is on black-red with a turn 2 Thraxodemon. Definitely an archetype that can do some scary things like stealing our best bomb and using it against us, so let's hope that kind of thing does not happen here. I really don't feel like I'm going to have the mana to just hold up a Scatter Ray too often on future turns when I can curve out Officer into Commando into Prison Sentence, all that kind of stuff. And at this point, my opponent all but knows that I have a Scatter Ray if I'm going to sit there thinking that long, so. Alright, fingers crossed, no early removal. Maybe just play the Wing Commando instead, try to draw out the early removal. But I'm going for it, and our opponent does not have the cheap removal. They are going to dig for it with a bitter reunion. So, Sky Strike Officer, so far going to do some great stuff, and now we can just hold up a Zephyr Sentinel to protect it, which is incredible. I'm just going to play like 3 of our top 4 cards this game. Sky Strike Officer, Harbin, and Zephyr Sentinel. Full control, so I can cast the Zephyr Sentinel, target the Sky Strike Officer, and then before Zephyr Sentinel hits... before the Sky Strike Officer gets bounced, I can draw a card. Because I'm not going to make any blocks here. And there we go. That is how you get maximum value there. Which should be pretty devastating. Now we have a Hero of the Dunes. Well, that was exile removal. If that wasn't exile removal, I would have been a tiny bit sad about bouncing it there, but... Drop the Sky Strike Officer, drop an Energy Refractor. Opponent's got to do some really nasty stuff to win this race now. That's a pretty nasty thing. Tyrant of Kerr Ridges. Has haste this turn as well. Luckily, we've got a Hero of the Dunes as well because our deck is completely broken, so we can hit for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's 1 damage off if I just Hero of the Dunes here. So I can't do that. I need to pacify the Tyrant and kill my opponent in 2 turns instead. They can only crack back for 4. I can have a 1/1 and a flyer to block with. Yeah, played a little safe. Just double checking I don't have lethal here. I pick up Sky Strike Officer. Hero gives everybody +1/+0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, exactly 1 damage off. So we have to go Prison Sentence on the Tyrant. Scry. Neither of those are immediately impactful, so I think I just get rid of both. Hit for 6. Next turn we've got lethal in the sky. Opponent can draw a card, sacrificing the Tyrant to the Thraxodemon here in kind of a last-ditch effort. Powerstone Fracture, that works too. Sacrifice that to blow up my flyer. They are going to send both in. Very aggro here. We're at 5 life. If I crack back with both flyers, I just kill them. Hopefully this doesn't get me killed. I'm at 4 life here. Killzone Acrobat, and that is game. 5 damage on board. Exact lethal without the Hero of the Dunes even. Scary game there. Opponent actually put up quite the fight. We drew really well. We got multiple of our best cards. 2 of our rares and our best uncommon. Actually, 2 of our best uncommons, the Hero of the Dunes and the Zephyr Spirit or whatever. So, very, very impressive fight from our opponent there, because I think that's one of the best hands we've drawn all day. But 5-0 it'll be. The deck is unstoppable so far as we head into Game 6. So this is kind of a weird hand. It's pretty awkward. It's not doing a whole lot. And we get to draw multiple cards. We've got a great 1-drop. It's a weird keep, but still gonna keep it. Kind of a reluctant keep here. Not doing all that much right now, just hoping that the refractors hit reasonable cards. Well, can't attack into that. You know, I have so little action here, I actually kind of want to just hold up a scatter ray to make sure my opponent doesn't like 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop me. So I can scatter ray their 3-drop and then prison sentence their 4-drop. Well, that out obviously resolves. They're just going to cycle it to draw a card. Okay. Got double prison sentence now. I should have attacked for 1. That was really dumb. Missed a point of damage there. Just playing a little too quickly. Okay, that's scary enough. Get that out of here. Scrapwork Cohort. Pretty good draw. Unfortunately, it can't block in our Gothian Sprite. I might have to cast a prison sentence on that Sprite. But now we can attempt to race that card, because we can prison sentence every creature they play from now on. Shoot down, exile our Unearthing Soldier. Still potentially winning the race here, attacking for 3 damage a turn. Now I can Thopter Mechanic plus Refractor and definitely threaten to win the race, because I can trade Thopter Mechanic into the Sprite, and even if I don't, it's going to be a good amount of power to attack my opponent with. Very good draws now, and that actually makes it really nice that I didn't play the Energy Refractors yet, because now I've got another one to play next turn. I even have a Steel Seraph to play to start giving lifelink to something every turn. Really win the race. Very, very good draws from this point. These are some sweet cards. Forgot how incredible this deck is. There are so many just premium bombs and uncommons. There's a Thopter Mechanic, a Steel Seraph, a lot of really good stuff. Speaking of premium cards and really good stuff, Gix's Command, making the Argothian Sprite a 4/4 lifelink till end of turn and killing our biggest creature. Not what I would call ideal. Probably have to prison sentence that now and then set up lifelink next turn. 10 life here. We can't block that at all. If I set up lifelink this turn, I only gain 2, go to 12. I take more damage than the life I gain this turn. Yeah, let's shut that off. Hopefully they don't have another shoot down to exile our enchantment. Airlift Chaplain seems fine. I'll keep it. Obviously none of these can block, might as well get all the damage in. Again, I did miss out on a point of damage earlier. Our opponent should be at 15 life. If we lose this game by 1 life, that's on us. Skyfisher Spider doesn't really do anything. I mean, they get to kill our best card, but our best cards are tokens or something that can unearth anyway, so usually you're pretty unhappy, to see your opponent get to sack something for value. But, I mean, killing on our Unearth card isn't that much value, so we're good. 3/3, it's got Reach as well. The Reach is a problem. I don't want to kill that. I really don't want to kill that. But maybe we do. We've got to get in somehow. Prison sentence, frontliner, I guess. Gaia's Gift, give it hexproof. That's ridiculous. This combat trick is so good. It's really stupid. Just get 4 keyword abilities and a permanent +1/+1 counter. I did I think I talked that up earlier in the draft. I might have been wrong. But yeah, Gaia's Gift is one of my least favorite cards in the format. Just obnoxiously good combat tricks are always a bit frustrating. Like Take Up the Shield was last set. I'm snap taking that. Down to 6. They don't have a blocker. Alright, let's do some Steel Seraph things, fingers crossed. Start gaining some life here. White Source off Chromatic Star. Draw a card. Play the Frontliner. Play a Combat Courier. Give this lifelink. Attack all. Gain a couple life. Block with Combat Courier now. And then start gaining life every turn with Steel Seraph attacks if our opponent keeps attacking with the Spider. This is another removal spell off the top. Sure is. Epic Confrontation. Pretty good draw. Still definitely not over. Thraxodemon and Epic Confrontation there. It's getting real bad for us. Let's see what we get with our Chaplain. 2/2. Or I can just keep my 2/2 flyer. I guess I just grab a nonsense 2/2 here. Our opponent doesn't top deck a trick immediately. I can triple block trade with Spider. And then it's their 2/2 on the ground versus my 1/1 in the sky. And I've got another card draw here and another card draw here to get ahead in cards. Yep, they're ahead in life, but I'm ahead in cards. Feels like a decent place to be. Okay, if the cards are all lands, it won't matter. But well, I guess we'll find out. Still have one more card to draw here. Could threaten to have a trick to kill Thraxodemon here. Okay, oh, they're not going to take that bait. Hero of the Dunes. That is an exceptional draw. There we go. Can't bring back the Steel Seraph. That's a 6-mana card, technically. I can bring back Thopter Mechanic, Airlift Chaplain. A lot of good options. I think I play it really safe and bring back the Thopter Mechanic here, because that can trade into the Thraxodemon and leave behind another flyer. So I really get ahead on board. Argothian Sprite. Hate that. Despise that. They have more than enough mana to make that absolutely massive and kill me with it really quickly. 2 +1/+1 counters every turn. Ambush Paratrooper is a really good draw. We're hitting some fuel here. I do have the mana to do the +1/+1 here one time. Set up for really big double block on Sprite to make sure that thing dies if they attack in with it. They have 9 mana up. They can activate the Sprite one more time and make it a 6/6. It already dies to a double block. I guess maybe I should have just went for the aggro Paratrooper for 1 extra point of damage there. What trick do they have here? 7, 8, 9. Do they have another Gaia's Blessing? That would be really bad. Another Gaia's Gift. I mean, I die if I don't block, and I take 1,000,000 if I block with just 1 because of the trample, so even if they have Gaia's Gift, it feels like the best block is just slam both down here. Currently, just going to trade with both right now. I can force them to dump their mana into the Sprite here, since they're choosing not to right now, just in case they have like a big follow-up play this turn. Alright, force them to dump their mana into the Sprite, just in case they have a follow-up play that costs more than 3 mana. Now they can't cast it, or that costs 3 or more. But the trade still happens on board. Alright. Zephyr Sentinel's not a bad draw. Don't have the mana to use the Paratrooper twice, but I can use it once here. It's moderately risky, but they're very dead in 2 swings. 2 swings if I do this. Actually, this isn't risky at all, because the Zephyr Sentinel can pick up the Paratrooper, which has Flash, so I can actually still have 2 blockers up here. Oh my god, why? Gix's Command is such a stupid card. That's fair. I have some really stupid cards in my deck too. And I guess we just lose then. I can block Thraxodemon. But, and if I play Zephyr Sentinel... Actually, Zephyr Sentinel is going to be a 3 power. No. This is fine. Zephyr Sentinel is 3 power. It's power 2 or less, not mana value 2 or less. So Zephyr Sentinel doesn't die. And then I make sure Paratrooper doesn't die. I can play Paratrooper and trade here, or I can let them gain 4. They go to 7. I crack back for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I hit a land off the top, I kill them on the crackback, so I think I take this. Rather than trade both my creatures off to just die next turn to not having a creature to play. Alright, land off the top is victory. It is not a land off the top. Still in a pretty good position. I have the mana to play this and buff the board once. I think I attack with just Zephyr Sentinel, so I don't die to a removal spell. And then I still kill them next turn. Die to a Gaia's Gift if I block with Paratrooper. 5 power trample. I die to a Gaia's Gift either way. Right, if I double block, do I die to Gaia's Gift? They make it 5 power. Trample over for 1. I go to 1 life if I double block. But then I kill them with Zephyr Sentinel. But if I double block and they don't have Gaia's Gift, and they have just a removal spell, they kill Zephyr Sentinel and I lose. Okay. Opponent's just going to scoop them up because they know that they don't have anything, but I don't know that they don't have anything, so I kind of have to go through the hoops and see what's the best play versus a potential Gaia's Gift versus removal. So we'd have to factor in there which is more likely, another Gaia's Gift or another removal spell, and people tend to run a variety of removal spells, whereas Gaia's Gift is a card. There's only one Gaia's Gift in existence, so they can only have 2, maybe 3 Gaia's Gifts in their deck. But they could absolutely have like 4 or 5 removal spells in their deck, as you can see from Epic Confrontation and Double Gix's command. And Shoot Down. So I think I would end up making the play that loses to Gaia's Gift but not removal, and just blocking with Paratrooper. Because then I block with Paratrooper. If they have a removal spell, they kill one of these, and I hit them for 3 and kill them. But yeah, I was scared that I was going to make that block and they'd have Gaia's Gift, in which case if I double block with these 2, they'd only trample over for 1 with Gaia's Gift, and then I'd kill them with Sentinel. But yeah, Paratrooper on Thraxidemon, that's the line there. Game's over now. Time to stop over and analyzing it, but that was a scary one. That was a sketchy one. Double Gix's command from our opponent. Quite a powerful set of cards to fight through, but we fight right through there with our own set of ridiculously powerful cards in our deck as well. And we are 6-0 heading into what could be the final boss. And even if we lose, we got a couple more shots at getting a 7-win run today. Here we are on the play for the final game. We have the Zephyr Sentinel Scatter Ray combo, so I get to hold up Scatter Ray, and if I don't need to use it, I can play a Zephyr Sentinel. Another awkward mana game. We don't have a white source yet, but Chromatic Star can cast our first white spell, which will be a Prison Sentence, which lets us scry into the plains potentially, and we've drawn one of our biggest bombs. I see that every game, because we've got multiple ridiculous bombs in here, but Skystrike Officer is a disgusting card, spitting out soldiers every time it attacks and using those soldiers to draw a bunch of cards. Haywire Might from our opponent. They can exile our Chromatic Star, I suppose. I guess if they really want to do that, they can. Like, I wouldn't be happy with it, but they don't know that I wouldn't be happy with it. Do I want to hold off on Skystrike Officer until I get to hold up Zephyr Sentinel alongside it? I don't think I do. I think I'm just getting risky with it again. Just getting jiggy with it. They have a Powerstone Fracture, they sack the Clay Revenant and kill the officer, and that is exactly what they have. Sadness on the stack. We do have a Hero of the Dunes that could recur that later in the game. So all in all, probably not the worst thing ever. This is really awkward. I want to play the Thopter mechanic before I crack the Chromatic Star. So I don't want to play Harbin this turn, but if I do that play, it leaves me open to them Haywire Mighting my Chromatic Star. They did not Haywire Might in response to casting that. That was their best opportunity to do so. So at least now if they might the Chromatic Star, we still get the counter on the mechanic. So very lucky. They did not go for the interaction there in response to that. I guess they can still do it during their end step, because we would need to draw the card during our turn to get the counter on mechanic. Yeah, it's super awkward either way. And they did draw their card that really incentivizes them to sack creatures now, which is super brutal. I probably should have just played Harbin. Gotten one of my white spells out of the way. That is a real rough draw. Thopter Mechanic for Infiltrator is a pretty good trade. Probably want to try to do that on blocks, though. I'm already pretty far behind. Life total-wise, we're 4 life behind. Hit the white source. That is absolutely lovely. Play the big flyer here. Start racing. Sky Fisher Spider. That's not okay. I could Zephyr Sentinel in response to them sacking to kill a thing, but then the Infiltrator gets bigger and they're only sacking a Clay Revenant. So I'm not doing that much in terms of like painful things to my opponent by doing that. Airlift Chaplain holding up Zephyr Sentinel still, getting more flyers onto the board. Yoshin Frontliner is the potential draw. Because that has Unearth, I'm just going to leave it engraved to make this flyer bigger. It would also be really obvious that I'm holding up some kind of interaction if I picked up a 1-drop and didn't play it. Alright, we're going to pick up whatever they target here with -5/-5. Luckily they did target the soldier, so we get a counter on the Zephyr Sentinel. Clay Revenant's coming in hot. Overwhelming Remorse. They needed another creature engraved to cast that. That's cute, but I don't think it actually really mattered that much. Still only have 1 white source. That's a little awkward. I can only cast 1 spell this turn. But I'm definitely out racing at this point. So we just attack with everybody. And just play the highest power creature. Clay Revenant is back tapped. Land for our opponent. Energy Refractor is a beautiful draw. Now I have double white, potentially. And I get a counter on that Thopter Mechanic. I can do the Frontliner and a Vanguard this turn. So I shall. Opponent is down to 5, and they're just going to scoop them up. It is too much for my opponent to deal with. This deck is absolutely disgusting, absolutely nasty. Some of our opponents have made some really good plays, done some very synergistic things, and had some massive bombs of their own, but this deck just has too much in terms of bomb power and consistent, let's see, and it's going to get us a full 7-0 run, a very nice showing from the aggressive blue-white soldiers deck. As for over and underperformers here, obviously every rare that we took was absolutely exceptional. Being able to play a 3-power flyer for only 2 mana is pretty ridiculous, and that's the weakest rare in our deck. The other rares that we have were the Skystrike Officer. This pulled a lot of removal from our opponents, and when it didn't, it just spit out soldier after soldier and drew multiple cards. Pretty disgusting. Steel Seraph won multiple games. The abilities on this card just so good for only 3 mana. 3 mana, 3/3 flyer that gives another thing flying every turn or just getting lifelink every turn to make it really hard to race. Absolutely ridiculous. Both of these are just absolutely incredible bomb rares, the Skystrike Officer and the Steel Seraph, and the fact that the Hero of the Dunes off the splash can just pick up any of those bomb rares is absolutely horrific. It can pick up almost any creature in the whole deck. The Hero of the Dunes was phenomenal. I think the biggest weakness in the whole deck was a lack of removal here. only the 2 prison sentences and the 1 scatter ray. In the future, maybe I'd cut down on 1 refractor for another scatter ray, but I did have a lot of fun with my flow of knowledge, and it drew us 1,000,000 cards in 1 or 2 of those games, so it wasn't the worst edition in the universe like I expected it to be. It actually did its job. It did kind of what I wanted it to do. So pretty much everything in the deck got its time to shine and did some great stuff. So very happy with today's deck. And that is going to end today's video. So I hope you all enjoyed watching this draft as much as I enjoyed playing it today. If you did and you'd like to see more of these videos, you can always like, comment, and subscribe to let the YouTube algorithm know to send some more of these videos to you in your recommended feeds. Got plenty more Brothers War coming in the near future, and any new spicy or flashback limited formats that they bring onto Arena I love to cover. So if you're into any of that, primarily draft and sealed stuff, stick around on the channel. But other than that, with the whole outro spiel out of the way, I would like to, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon for some more Magic Arena.